Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots. Who live your shows, guys, like sirs, peasants, vassals, minions, pig sacks. I'm a useful idiot, and today I want to do an editorial. Editorial on the whole concept of it's not polite to talk about politics and religion. And of course, one of the first things I did when I looked into it is to find the origin. And I couldn't really find what the origin of this whole concept or how long it's been around. But it sounds very much like a social engineering concept that someone like Edward Bernays would have come up with. And so we have this ingrained in us now. It's just conventional wisdom, as it were. And so now we've arrived at a point where anybody who doesn't really want to talk about politics or religion can just bring up the idea that it's not polite to talk about politics and religion. And one reason why I bring this up is because I work for a small chain, family-owned grocery stores, and the owners recently passed down a memo, as it were, saying that it's not kosher at work to talk about politics and religion. But they let it be known that it was all right to talk about football. And I'm actually not making this up. This is actually true. So, of course, you know right off the bat that I have nothing to do with that, and I'm not talking about politics and religion at work. So I'm sure they're not targeting me or my compatriot Jeff Dowdy. But that said, so now we've arrived at a point where basically it's common wisdom that it's not polite to talk about politics and religion, and I find this rather baffling. When you think about politics and religion, you're talking about our government, how our daily lives are run, what our values are, our civic responsibilities, voting, all these manifestations of being a citizen in the United States. And the other one, of course, religion, the whole concept of meaning, finding meaning in life. And so we're not supposed to talk about these two giant pillars that consume a great portion of every person's life. And so I'm going to proffer that instead, I think people should talk about religion and politics, because the problem isn't talking about deeper issues like politics and religion. It's the fact that people don't know how to talk about it, because we look at our media icons, and we look at our politicians, we look at our congressmen, and we get a bad example of how you are supposed to discuss ideas with people around you in your community. And so we end up having people use the same old cliched jargon they get from mainstream media and various loudmouth pundits. They end up getting regurgitated in arguments at the local level between individuals. And this is a common theme that pops up in a lot of my videos, this false Dempublican versus Republican two-party false paradigm, which is dead. And this is just another manifestation of that for me, because why shouldn't people who have liberal values, people who have conservative values, be able to get together and discuss these without resorting to the same kind of verbal violence we see on television, radio, and in politics? And can the American people rise above that? One reason why I say that to be is because the gap between so-called conservatives and so-called liberals basically boils down to individualism versus collectivism. And anybody with an ounce of intellectual honesty can admit that both concepts have certain validity, and some things are right and some things are wrong in both schools of thought about collectivism and individualism. And so anyway, when you put it in those terms, there's no reason why Americans should be pitted against each other like this. But let's get back to the discussion. So we haven't learned to talk about politics and religion, and another reason why we don't do it, or it's not considered polite, is because that we don't do it. And I found that people around me, in employment I've had over the last 50 some odd years, and people in my family and friends that I have. The deeper relationships revolve around people who you can discuss these deeper things in life with, politics and or religion. And one problem is people need to not take themselves so seriously, and don't be so insecure. So when people talk about these things, just realize there's different ways to view the same thing. But anyway, let's get to one of the other aspects of not talking about politics and religion, and what kind of problem there is with that. Because one kind of problem that we have with that also is that what do people talk about? They talk about consumer corporate culture. And so is this the kind of citizenry we want to have in the United States, or anywhere else for that matter, where basically consumer corporate culture is what's discussed every day, and not things like politics or religion? And I'm all fine and good with frivolity. I'm all fine and good with fun. I'm all fine and good with entertainment. But for people to spend all their time talking about sales, what great deals they have, what was on television, what the biggest new blockbuster is, what's the biggest new sports event, what are celebrities doing now, etc., which ends up consuming time, and certainly doesn't necessarily build any kind of relationships with the people around you. And certainly there are obvious answers to why this whole cultural norm has developed. It's much easier to discuss things without the potential of causing conflict. And once again, I suggest that we have a culture that's not very educated in conflict resolution. So there's certainly a problem there. And but we've American culture's taken it to the extreme where avoiding conflict at all costs in our personal lives is of value, which is ironic considering our government avoiding conflict at all costs is the opposite tactic that they like to use. But who's to say that the fact that we do not talk about deeper issues like religion and politics and so-called mixed company, how do we know that that hasn't led to intolerance, oversensitivity, defensiveness, and narcissism? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? And maybe people would be more tolerant, and people would be less insensitive, and people wouldn't be so defensive, and people wouldn't be so less empathetic and insensitive to others if they spent more time talking about politics or religion. Just a thought. So what we've ended up with is a society of citizenry who are illiterate of politics and ignorant about religion. And that's a whole other topic about social engineering in society to get to the point where people really are illiterate of politics. Liberals really don't know much about the policies of the current administration, and a lot of so-called conservatives didn't know much about the policies of the last administration. And even though the policies of both administrations are identical, for some reason, a lot of conservatives and liberals still seem to think there's some kind of difference, or at least there's a difference when it's the other guy doing it. But I think this brings up another point of why there's a norm of people not wanting to talk about politics and religion in mixed company, because then they have to admit and potentially be embarrassed by the fact that they don't know anything about politics and religion. They might even profess Christianity and not know any of the material from the Bible. They may profess to be a liberal and really not know anything about the policies of the Obama administration. They may profess to be conservative and really not know what that even means. They just gravitate towards pop psych issues pandered to them by the media and the politicians. But potentially people could forge deeper relationships and learn from each other, learn to understand. And let's face it, people fear what they do not understand, and then people attack what they do not fear, what they fear. So therefore, this is an easy ploy for the powers that be and forces in society to basically herd the sheeple. So the herd doesn't need a shepherd anymore because the sheeple herd themselves. And but this is at the very core of one side of America being against the other and being pitted against the other, to the point where we actually hear preposterous phrases like one half of America hates America, which I continue to get tired of hearing. So then let's get down to brass tacks. One of the other aspects of this is that most Americans, unfortunately, at this point, their attention spans are so short, and their lives, pace of their lives are so quick that, frankly, politics and religion are just downright boring. And well, there's that. So I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too?